I didn't want to hurt anybody. I really didn't want to ever see that monster come back out who tried to kill this woman who I did love, who I did want to be best friends with. I didn't want to be the person who I had become. And so the only option there was to kill myself. So I ate those pills and I started walking down the road because I figured if I stayed in the house that I was surely just going to get found and that one of them was going to call the cops. So I just decided to walk down the road and eventually I would fall. Well, I woke up and I was in the hospital and I had my stomach pumped. And there is this woman sitting beside me. And she just says, "Mark, I love you." You don't deserve to die. You are a beautiful person. And I was very sad that I had not died. And at the same time, I was very, very unworthy to be in the presence of this woman. Hello, I'm Mark Turnipseed, and I'm a survivor of lifetime of suicide ideation and attempts. I'm also the author of My Suicide Race, Winning Over the Trauma of Addiction, Recovery, and Coming Out. I wrote this book to share that other people aren't alone, to share that I wasn't alone, for me to finally understand, where I came from, how far I've come, and how many people are out there who share in a similar fate and a similar path. About 4 years ago, I suffered from 3 very serious suicide attempts where I finally nearly succeeded. My life prior to that had been filled with the ideation and the wishful hoping that my life would be taken away through drugs and alcohol. I remember when I was about 12 years old and I heard of the Doors and I got real involved in studying Jim Morrison and his poetry and looking at his life, reading about his biography, and I looked into his life and I go, that is the type of life I want. I want one where drugs and alcohol take me out. That was at 12 years old. Prior to 12 years old, I felt like that too, but I didn't know how to come about or come to the actual point of death. Once I learned that it could be done through drugs and alcohol, I thought that was a logical way to go, a logical way to finally be released from the person who I wasn't happy being. Not only the person I wasn't happy being, the person that I couldn't be. I wouldn't allow myself to be. I didn't think that the person inside of me deserved to live. I was molested by my cousin, who was only a couple years older than me. But there was some very heavy grooming and teaching that was involved in it that made it more than just exploration of, little kids and being sexual with each other or experimenting. Rather, it felt as if I was being instructed about how to act and how to be. Right before this incident, I was down in Disney World with my family, and we were checking out. We were walking out of the big, huge gates, and my parents said, "Okay, Mark, now it's time. You can go into the gift shop and you can finally pick whichever stuffed animal that you want." And I was so very excited to go into the gift shop, and I ran in there and I knew exactly the stuffed animal that I wanted. And it was Minnie Mouse. She was my favorite. I didn't know why. I didn't know how to explain it, but she was. And so I ran right over to Minnie Mouse while my brother went and picked around at the different stuffed animals. And and he ran back with Goofy, and I had already come over to my parents with Minnie Mouse, and my parents and my older brother said, "But Mark, you can't get Minnie Mouse." They laughed at me and they said, "Mark, you can't get Minnie Mouse. Minnie Mouse is for little girls and you're a little boy." And that really confused me because I didn't identify with that. I didn't identify, and before that I hadn't identified really with a lot of the things that little boys did. I remember being enthralled about theater and Broadway plays at a very, very early age, musicals, and I was kind of told that, that wasn't, the artsy stuff wasn't for little boys, that I should be playing sports, that I should be getting dirty out in the yard. And so, I think at that age I was already being told that who I felt I was inside wasn't right. And so because of that, I began to want to escape who I was inside. And so right around that time of the molestation and the Minnie Mouse stuff, I remember thinking in my head while laying down in my bedroom, maybe I should just die. I barely even knew what death was at this point. I definitely didn't know what the term suicide meant. Shoot, I didn't even know that was an option on the face of this earth, that somebody could just kill themselves. But I remember flirting around with this idea and this concept that if I was just gone, everything would be better. I wouldn't have to suffer anymore. I wouldn't be wrong everywhere I went. And so that pattern continued in my life. Now, it only got exacerbated after the molestation. During that event, my cousin, he said, "Mark, why don't we do a beauty contest where you try on my sister's underwear?" And so I tried them on and I danced around the house and I was having a ball. I really actually kind of enjoyed it. And they would just laugh at me every time it was in this little fort, and I would run into the fort, change into underwear, and I would go, "Oh, these are cute. I'm gonna jump out and dance around," and I would, and they would laugh at me. And I was like, "Why are they laughing at? Like, this is fun. I don't get it." And then my cousin kind of isolated me in the fort and said, "Okay, now let's play what goes on behind the scenes at a beauty pageant." And he told me to take my underwear off, and he told me to act like the girl of the beauty pageant. And so, one thing led to the next, and I learned what sex was. That's how I learned. Ironically, I never felt like the incident was tragic. I never felt like it was horrible. Rather, I felt like what was horrible was the fact that I kind of identified with it and I kind of enjoyed it, and that was so wrong. About that same time, the AIDS crisis had just hit. So we're talking about, early 90s. The AIDS crisis had been going on, but it was really starting to get a lot of heavy media pressure. And so every time we would watch the news, every time we would watch a baseball game and a commercial would come on, it would be warning people about AIDS. And when there is uncertainty, when there's ignorance surrounding a topic such as AIDS, there's a lot of fear around it because nobody really even knows how to discuss it. So at this point in the media, there was so much fear that filled my house, that filled my parents, that filled the people who were teaching me about how to conduct myself in life. That filled our churches, filled our education system. We were all very scared of something that I was starting to learn to identify with, which was the homosexual nature that was inside of me. And because there was so much fear on the outside, that fear began to creep on the inside of myself. And so I started to get really scared inside, and couple that with the idea that I was wrong. And then I became scared of who I was, and all I wanted to do was isolate, to run away, to escape any way that was possible. So I learned early on about how to strangle myself, that if I could put my hands on each side of my neck really tightly, and I would do this almost every night. If I did this really tightly, that I would just kind of fall asleep and I would drift off, and then I would wake back up. And I remember doing this frequently, to the point that it kind of scared me. And at this same time too, I was kind of using that to escape another big fear that I had, that I felt like I had been born the wrong sex. And so there was a lot of early childhood thinking of body mutilation. And I would be laying in bed, not being able to sleep, and I would just be kind of going crazy inside of my head, just like, I'm the wrong sex. Everything that I like is wrong. Just what am I supposed to do? And so I would sit there and I would think, well, maybe what I'm supposed to do is to cut my penis off. And I would think that every single night, and that suffocation actually became a way of me to get away from thinking about my body being wrong and thinking about the other aspects of me as being wrong. About this same age, I found another coping mechanism that would end up leading into my addiction to drugs and alcohol, and that was obsessive compulsive behaviors. I was laying in my bedroom, and I remember a thought came into my head, this intrusive thought that my front door was open at our house. And when I thought about my front door being open, I was all of a sudden filled with this anxiety. And I was like, I've got to go check and see if the front door is open. Although I knew that the front door was not open, that it was closed. My parents closed it all the time. I had no reason to believe that it wasn't. But there was a little bit of anxiety that poked up. And this little bit of anxiety, the only way to solve it was to go down and check the door. So I went down and checked the door. And then I came back up, and instantly, upon checking that door, I felt a release. I felt a release from my anxiety, and I could take a deep breath, and I felt at peace. And this was a very, very monumental time for me, because I realized that through obsessive compulsive behaviors, I could deal with my anxiety. So this pattern, this one instance of which it occurred, began to mushroom on itself. It began to build bigger and bigger and more. So every single night I would lay down and I would think of more and more things that I needed to go check. I would get up after everybody had gone to sleep. I would wait for them to all fall asleep, and then I would get up and I would go down and I would check all the cabinets. I would check to the silverware was aligned. I would check the doors being open. I would check the windows. And then it got to the point where I was checking so much stuff that I was absolutely exhausted. So the way that I was finding escape was beginning to get exhaustive. I couldn't maintain it anymore. Along the same time, I began to notice that, well, girls are becoming attracted to me. Maybe I can use girls. Maybe I can use sex as a way of escaping. Maybe I can even prove to myself that I am like other boys, that I am into women. And that's the next thing that I went heavy into at about 9 or 10 years old. I was just all about, or maybe 12, I began to get all about the girls, and I had a girlfriend and then another in the back pocket. I was cheating at a very early age. Well, that didn't last too long, because right around that same time, I was also introduced to marijuana. Now, my introduction to marijuana was actually the first thing that saved me from my very first suicide attempt. One day, my mom was downstairs and she was making dinner, and I was upstairs very, very depressed. I had just been broken up with by a girlfriend, and when a girlfriend broke up with me, it was very similar to if I wasn't at the very top of the game in athletics. I got absolutely depressed, and things that happened like that would make me feel like the world was at an end. And so right before this time when I got broken up with, I had heard of an old acquaintance killing himself by hanging himself in his closet, and that he was found swinging. I had also heard of a friend's dad who had shot himself. And so now these thoughts of, thinking about suicide, thinking about death, thinking about that being an option, now they really kind of became tangible, and they kind of became personal, and they kind of became something that was a possibility for me. Now remember, it wasn't a possibility for me to be myself. It wasn't a possibility for me to come out. At this point, I was actually being sexually active with other boys, but it was not an option for me to share that with other people. So that's why I had the girlfriends. That's why I played the sports. I had to mask all of that stuff. And then with that becoming so exhaustive, and with learning that, suicide was an actual option for me, that became my thought that day while my mom was making dinner, was to hang myself in my closet. And so I hung up a belt on my little pole inside of my closet, and then I looked around my room, and there was no little chair that I could use to get my neck up there, and I couldn't, pull the belt down and then pull myself up. So there was just some logistical problems, and I realized the only way that I could do this was if I brought a bar stool up from downstairs where my mom was making dinner. But obviously if I did that, she would ask questions and I had no answer. And so that was not going to be an option. About a week prior to this, I had also on a carpool pickup, we were picking up my friend's sister from soccer, and I was walking around in the parking lot waiting for her to get done with her soccer, and I found 2 bags of marijuana on the ground. I just found them. It was like godsend. But I didn't really know what to do with them, so I just put them in my pocket. I hadn't ever smoked, and I showed it to her, and she said, "Oh, that's pot. Let me have it." She was a little bit older. And I was like, "No, I think I'm just going to hold on to it because, maybe I could sell it. Maybe I could give it to my brother." I don't know what I was thinking, but I was just like, let me hold on to it. And so when this happened, after I put my belt up in my closet, it just popped into my head, oh wait, I got these little bags of pot, and my brother has this little pipe. So I might as well go over to his room, grab the pipe, and run out and smoke pot. So I did this. I ran out and found a little place in the woods, and I smoked pot for my first time and coughed all over the place. It hurt so bad. I was like, why am I doing this? I don't even understand it. But here's the thing, much like when I shut that first door with my OCD, I felt a little bit of a release, and I felt freedom for a split second, really, because I didn't get high my first time smoking, but I felt a release, and I felt freedom, and I felt like a new person, like a new identity was coming that I could accept. And I went back, and I wasn't high, and I sat down for dinner. We ate dinner, and right after dinner I decided, instead of going back upstairs, and taking the bar stool upstairs with me to kill myself, that I would go back out and try this pot thing one more time. When I did the second time that day, that evening, I got really, really, really freaking high. I got so high I didn't even know how to, like, directionally I could not find my house. My neighborhood was small. I remember walking around my neighborhood just like not even recognizing the houses that were right next door to my home, and the houses that I saw on a daily basis. And to me, that was absolute euphoria. I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize my life. I didn't recognize where I had grown up. All of a sudden, I had that detachment from my identity, my detachment from my family, my detachment from my life. Later on, this would turn into a detachment from morals and a detachment from values that were founded and would root me or ground me, and ultimately end up destroying my life, because as you lose morals, as you lose values, and all you're doing is thinking about drugs and alcohol, you then begin to push everyone out of your life. And then, that's the spot that I thought that I wanted, but it ultimately wasn't. So anyway, that process starts fairly slow. It starts kind of incipient in my life, and it starts innocently, and then it begins to creep into other areas of my life. It began to creep into the relationships that I was having with friends. I started to push away my friends who didn't want to be involved with drugs, and I started to slip out of sports. By the time that I was 15, I was using cocaine on a regular basis. I was smoking weed constantly, kind of all day, skipping classes. I was drinking, and that had become my life. That had become who I wanted to be. I was always wearing a little tie-dye shirt, trying to grow my hair out, trying to take on this new identity any way that I possibly could. And so at 15, my parents saw this happening, and they decided that they didn't really know how to deal with me. And so an option was to ship me off to youth rehab. I ended up in a youth boarding school, and at that youth boarding school, it was a very restrictive program, and I wasn't able to use anything that I had previously used to show the boy to other people, the boy that I was supposed to be, not the boy I felt inside, but the boy I was supposed to be. A common theme happens from my youth all the way into adulthood. I would set myself in places that made it possible for maximized my potential for showing the opposite of who I was inside. And so here I am at a youth boarding school that did not foster my ability to be able to show who I wanted people to see me as. And that was a straight masculine drug addict. And so what ended up happening is I started to try to get with the girls on the campus. And the problem with that was that it wasn't allowed, and it was highly monitored. There's video cameras everywhere. So they ended up catching me making out with a girl, and I got in a lot of trouble, and then all of a sudden I couldn't see the girls. And so then I go, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Now, I'm just surrounded by the boys who I'm attracted to, and I can't act on that, of course, because that's an identity I just don't have the freedom, and I don't have the option of being. At this point in my life, I actually didn't know a single gay person. Not a single person in my life had ever come out. I knew that gay people existed, but I had never even met one. And so and I was in this boys' dormitory with all these guys, and I had crushes on them, and I had no way of being like, okay, it's okay. It's okay to feel this way towards them. Oh man, I reflect back on it as being one of the scariest times ever. Having to shower around people um, and how to compose myself with other guys. I really lost it. I had no way to escape. There was no more chatter. Like when there were girls, when I was able to have girls around, if the gay chatter in the locker room came up, I could always just talk about my girlfriend and the sex that we were having. But all of a sudden, girls are gone, drugs are gone, and the gay jokes within the dormitory are still there. And then this weird thing happened, like splits in my brain, where I begin to always think that these jokes are about me. And I always think that these guys know that I'm attracted to them, or they're gonna find out that I'm gay. And then it was almost as if I kind of went a little mental there, and so I decided that I was going to burn the school down, and I got with a couple of guys and tried to arrange us burning the school down. Luckily, they found out about this. My anger had, completely just built up like so big inside of me that I didn't know how to deal with it. And this idea that everybody was looking and laughing at me led me into a very, very like deep internal place where it started to drift on the edge of like narcissistic personality disorder. I couldn't get outside of my head. I was always thinking about how I'm coming off to other people, how I'm projecting myself. Everybody's laughing at me. When things in the world are going wrong, it's all my fault. When things in the world are going right, it's all my fault too. And I started to develop very, very strong grandiosity, but at the same time, very, very strong self-defeating thoughts. And this would ultimately lead me into a state of later on developing bipolar-like symptoms where when good stuff was going on, I thought it was all about me. These big grandiose thoughts would come and I felt pumped up. I felt jazzed on life. I began to get manic and I would just be running around doing everything. And then all of a sudden one little wrong thing would happen and it was all my fault. The world was over. I just had to die, and I would just lay in bed and I couldn't even move. I was debilitated by that. And so that was where I was in that school. And then I got moved from that school into another program that was a Christian Ranch program. At this Christian Ranch school, when they were driving me to the place, they said, okay, when you get there, we don't talk to the owners as teachers or house parents. We call them mom and dad. And I was like, wow, that is very weird. Why do we call the owners of this program mom and dad? And they're like, you'll see. Because we try to set it up as a Christian family program. And so you're joining a new family. And I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be kind of weird. And at this point, I had a lot of resent and a lot of anger towards the Christian church, largely because it was that theology that I believed prevented me from being who I knew that I should be, but that ultimately I couldn't be. And so, I had the mental faculties at this point to kind of understand where the stigma from or against being gay was ultimately coming from. And so right when I got into this program, they told me that in order to graduate this program that you were going to have to become a Christian. And I laughed at them and I said, there's absolutely no way you're going to make me become a Christian. My parents have raised me this to be a Christian my whole life, and I still haven't become one, and I'm not going to become one. And they just kind of chuckled and laughed and said, yes, you will. Well, I put up a darn good fight for a couple of years at this program, to the point to where it was a 4-level program, 1, 2, 3, 4, to where at the point where I got to the 4th level, the 3rd or the 4th, I was like right in that top tier, basically about to graduate the program, and I still hadn't become a Christian. And then they said, wow, Mark, this is impressive. Like, we've never had somebody go through this program still not a Christian. And I took pride in that, but something very, very life-changing was about to happen that would ultimately change the course of the rest of my life. And so what happened was, one day we got a new student. This new student's name was Ryan. And Ryan came into the program, and just like every other kid who comes into the program, you sit down in this big room, and you sit down all next to each other in this big circle. There's about 15 of us. And they ask you, okay, Ryan, why are you here? Well, first you go around the room and you tell why you're here, why the people who had been there, why they are there, and then they ask the new person why that new person's there. And so we all go around, tell our story. Well, I was drugs and alcohol. Well, I was raped, and I did this and I did that, and all these like tragic stories. And then it got over to Ryan, and Ryan was sitting on a couch just like this, and with a face just like this, just said, my parents sent me here because I'm gay. And all of a sudden, like, my life just moved really, really, really slow for the next couple of minutes. And I was transfixed at this boy. I was just kind of shocked. First of all, I had never met another gay person. Second of all, this is a young boy about my age who just told a whole group of other boys that he's about to be living with in the same house that he was gay. I did not think that was an option. I did not think you could do that. And so this was the very, very first time in my life that I ever had a glimmer of hope, that it would be an option for me to finally accept myself and to let other people know who I really was inside. So it wasn't right after that I decided that I could do it. It took a week or two, but we had another one of those group discussions, and we all sat down, and I said, I like Ryan, have had interest in other men. I have same-sex attraction. And when I did, I felt like there was a load lifted off of me. I felt better. I really did. I felt lighter. But, I didn't say it like he did. I didn't say it completely. Rather, I just said, I felt like I had suffered from same-sex attraction. And the owners of the program and the people who worked there, they said, it's okay. We are going to help you guys get over this. Treat it as a disorder, basically. And we're going to use prayer, just like they used prayer for the drug and alcohol, for the trauma, for everything else. We're going to use prayer, and we're going to use, church, basically, to help you overcome your gayness. And so, I'm almost out of the program. I'm about to be able to graduate, and I'm still not a Christian, and I had just kind of come out of the closet for my first time. And I was developing this wonderful relationship with Ryan, and we were becoming very, very close. And then we all go to this Bible camp. And while we're at this Bible camp, one night they asked me to say the prayer. We're all laying in the beds of this kind of like dormitory-ish place. There's probably about 10 people in these rooms. And I'm in the bed, and they're like, Mark, will you say the goodnight prayer? And I'm like, sure. I've mumbled off a lot of prayers in my life. I can do that just fine. And so I say the prayer, And then they say, now it's time for us all to proclaim that Jesus is our Lord. And I go, well, he's not mine, so I'm not going to say that. And then they start talking about, a couple of them start talking amongst themselves, some of the elders, and they decide that I cannot say that because I am demon possessed. Ryan was able to say that. He didn't have a problem saying that. He had actually been to various different conversion programs by that point. He was a very strong Christian, and he really believed that God could take his gay away, but it just kept not working. And so this was another program that he was trying to use to have that happen. It was his deepest hope that he would be able to cure his gay. And for me, though, I still didn't want God. I still didn't want God to cure this thing. You know, I just wanted to be this thing. They told me that I had to say, Jesus Christ is my Lord. And I said, no, I won't. And so what they did is they said, okay, everybody leave. We are going to start praying for Mark now so that he can be relieved of his demons. And then 4 or 5 priests gathered around me. 2 grabbed onto my legs, 2 grabbed onto my arms, and they began shouting in tongues and praying and screaming in the room for my demons. They were calling them by different names, and it was horrifying. They turned off the lights, and it was a really scary situation, and it went on for a couple of hours. I was fighting so hard that there were times during this occasion that I blacked out, that I don't remember. All I remember is that it was horrifying. And then eventually I just got so exhausted of fighting, I just said, you know what, I'm going to say it. So I said it. I said, Jesus Christ is my Lord. And then when I did, they all let go. Now, something happened here, maybe is what you call brainwashing, but when they let go, I felt all of a sudden free, obviously, right? I felt free. But see, what they had always said is when you proclaim Jesus Christ as your Lord, you're free from your sins. Well, when you add the fact that when you say Jesus Christ is your Lord and 4 people let go of you, you're also free, then, you know, it kind of actually makes you feel free. So I kind of became on fire Christian right after this. And it was a very interesting thing that happened. But I go on and I graduate the program. And when I'm graduating the program, I'm signing up for different colleges. And I choose this Bible seminary college because I think that that's what I want to do now, is I want to be a full-blown Christian. So upon my graduation, I leave and I go start working at an internship with a youth minister down in South Georgia. Now, when I was down in South Georgia at this youth ministry, it was fun. I had a good time working there. I began to do some public speaking and stuff like that. It was all kind of exciting. But I was really unhappy with the actual work, the actual message that I was giving. I was conflicted inside, because I kind of knew that I wasn't actually free from my gayness. I knew it was still there, and I was like, why is it still here? A lot of people go through this very similar experience who had been through conversion therapy, and I didn't really know that until much later. Actually, right when I came out, I found out that Ryan's parents came out with a documentary about conversion therapy and how tragic it can be on a boy's life who they think that they're cured from it, and then it comes back and they realize that they're not cured from it. And that's what happened to me, and because of that, I fell straight back into the last thing that I knew helped me to escape from that person, and that was drugs and alcohol. Now, a couple of months into that summer, I was hanging out with my friends and I got a phone call. And on the caller ID it said Seattle, Washington. And I go, I don't really know anybody from Seattle, Washington. Who could this be? And I answered the phone and he goes, Mark, it's Ryan, and I'm almost to Sea Island. I'm almost to Georgia. I'm going to be able to come see you. And I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, yeah, I've been sucking trucker across the United States, and I'm about to come and see you. So he had been hitchhiking all across the United States, sexually prostituting himself out so that he could come visit me. And I went and picked him up, and when we saw each other outside of that program, it was special. That very first moment that I saw him, I talk about it in my book. He actually smelt really bad because he had been hitchhiking across the U.S. So it wasn't that special, but it felt right, So we went home. He got in the shower, and then we went on a walk on the beach, and it was the very, very, very first time that I, truly felt love for another person in a romantic way and not in a useful way. I had been using relationships. I had been using women. I had been holding hands, not for the implicit good that a holding of the hand was. I was holding hands for what it displayed to other people. I did everything in my life for how it displayed to other people, how it showed me as a straight person, how it showed me as a drug addict, how it showed me as an alcoholic. But this night, I was holding Ryan's hand just out of genuine affection, and it felt so freaking good to be natural. Unfortunately, I was using a lot of drugs and alcohol. And so, we got kind of lost in that. And for the next week, we were just drunk, and we were using a whole bunch of ecstasy, and we were, having a bunch of sex. And one night my mom walked in on us, and we were having sex, and she didn't stop us. She just shut the door and walked out, and we kept on going. Well, the next morning, she comes and wakes us up and says, Ryan's leaving. I got him a plane ticket and got to take him back to the airport. And when she walks out of the room, she says, don't worry, Mark, we won't tell your dad. And something really just kind of broke inside of me there. I thought maybe, getting caught was, yes, finally it's known. But instead it was, yes, it's known, but it's now going to have to be even more of a secret. So this big happening was just a really, really heartbreaking situation. And I took Ryan to the airport, and I got so high off of Valium and Xanax, and we had been, strung out for a couple of days, and I fell asleep in the car, and I woke up, and there was a little note in the car that said, Mark, I tried to wake you up, and I kissed you goodbye, and we'll talk again soon. And so we did. We continued to talk, and I went off to my Bible seminary college and started meeting friends, and I found a girlfriend. I was going through my same routines, and one night Ryan called me up and said that he had found this new concoction of drugs that helped us to where we could have an outer body experience and we could meet each other on the celestial plane. And I thought, how cool is that? That sounds like a lot of fun. Let's do it. So he sent me this little pack of drugs. There were some pills in it. There was some powder. I don't really know what it was, but it had a list of ingredients, and then it had directions upon the order that you were supposed to take these ingredients. And then you wait a couple of hours, and I think you fall asleep or something, and then you end up on this this other plane. So what our goal was to take it and wake up holding each other in the sky. Well, instead of taking it the day that we agreed upon, I didn't. I went to a music festival, and I got back from this music festival, and I was excited to call Ryan and say, okay, let's do it. And I got a phone call that that Ryan had an accident, and that he was in the hospital. Ryan was in a coma. And I felt like I had disappointed him. I felt like I had disappointed myself. I felt like I had let him down. I felt like I hadn't been true to my heart. I felt like I should be in the coma with him. And a couple of weeks later, he wasn't waking up from his coma. It was just getting worse. And his parents decided to pull the plug. After that happened, the possibility, that little glimmer of hope that I talked about earlier, that I could come out, that little glimmer of hope, it disappeared with Ryan. And that's when the heroin came into play. And at first it was smoking it, and then it was not very long until I started shooting heroin up. And that first time when I shot heroin up, I entered into this oblivion, the oblivion that I had always sought, the oblivion that was complete escape and complete freedom from everything on this planet, from myself, from my identity. I slowly drifted off. I fell asleep just like I had fallen asleep when I strangled myself as a kid. I was comfortable. I was back in the womb. I was on angel wings when I did that first heroin shot. So the heroin use starts to get pretty bad. And I remember every time that I would shoot up, or generally every time that I would shoot up, I would also put on my headphones, and I would either listen to like Sublime, or some Nirvana, or some Blind Melon, because all those three artists, all those three singers, they always, they had died of heroin overdose. And so listening to them, each time I shot up, I identified with them. And every single time that I poked my arm with that serum and watched it go in there, I hoped that I would die. Every single time that I shot up, it was a suicide attempt. It was a suicide hope. There was a question, will this kill me this time or not? And I was lucky enough that each time I was answered to that question, no, this will not kill you this time. No, this will not kill you this time. Maybe next time, try again. So I did. I kept on trying and trying and trying, and I kept on failing and failing and failing. I kept on not achieving that oblivion, and I kept on chasing the dragon, so they say. And then it was spring, a couple years ago, spring a little bit over 3.5 years ago, when I'm laying on my couch about 9 o'clock in the morning, waking up from, being drunk the night before, and I get a phone call, and it's my cousin, and my cousin says, "Mark, I'm headed to Whitefish, Montana." And I go, what are you gonna do up here? He says, "I'm coming to visit you." I was like, "I haven't seen you in like 3 years. Why are you coming?" He was like, "I don't know. I just wanted to get out of town." So he comes up, and when he does, I notice that something's different about him. I don't really know what it is, but he wants to go on a walk. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we could go on a walk. And so we go walk around the neighborhood, and as we're walking around, he looks down at the ground. And out in Montana, it's really funny because like throughout all of the winter, you've got this much snow and there's no color. It's all black and white. And then all of a sudden the winter starts to dwindle away and these little itty bitty flowers will poke up. And they'll poke up all over the place. They're like little specks of color and they're absolutely beautiful. And we're walking down here and he goes, wow. And he looks down and he goes, wow, look at that flower. That is just absolutely beautiful. And when he says that, I look at him and I go, man, I have not thought of something as being beautiful in so many years. I was like, I've just been barely existing. I've wanted to die. And I was like, well, look, I live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and all I want to do is escape. All I've been doing is like hiding away in this dank house with old pizza boxes and moonshine. And I'm living here with all this possibility to see all this beauty in life. And so a little glimmer of hope comes back into my life for the first time in a very, 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 very long time. And I go, maybe there is a possibility that I too, because my cousin had actually escaped from his alcoholism. About a year prior, he was found in his house drunk and passed out on the ground, and he ended up in treatment and getting better. And that little glimmer of hope was like, man, maybe if he did it, I can do it too. And so by the end of his visit, I end up asking him, how did you do this? How did you get sober? And he goes, I just joined a community of other people who were also sober. And I began asking them what worked for them. And he goes, you can come with me if you want. I can show you the people who are doing that in this town. And I go, okay, I'll go with you. So that the morning before he left, I went with him to meet the local people who were also sober. And I went back to that meeting every single day, multiple times a day. And I was staying as sober as I possibly could. I wasn't drinking, but I was still using a lot of Xanax and pot. But just the fact that I was getting off of the substances a little bit gave me a little break from that like oblivion and darkness that I had been living in. And I started to become, kind of attractive. I got a good job. I started losing a little bit of weight, and a girl found me attractive, and she came into my life. And this woman, when she came into my life, she really shined a light on me. This woman, I knew right when I met her that I didn't necessarily want to be her husband, but I did want to be her best friend. And I told her, I said, one way or the other, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I want either you to be my best friend or I want to marry you. Well, 2 weeks later, we ended up getting married. And I was kind of thrilled about it. But at the same time, everything crashed down on me because I knew that if I was going to be married again with a woman, that eventually I was going to face it head on that I was actually a gay man. And how was I going to do this? And I freaked out because I knew that I was going to have to share this with her. And instantly I started to think about going back out to drink again. And one day when we were at breakfast, I had this fit of anger. We got in a fight and I had this fit of anger, and then I went to work, and the next thing that I knew, I was intoxicated, and I did not know how this happened. I had blacked out from my anger, and I caught myself drinking booze, trying to escape again, trying to find that oblivion. And I was just kind of mystified. Like, where did this happen? How did this happen? But it didn't stop there. I went home, and I also had a whole bunch of acid that I kept in my safe. And I went and ate some of the acid, and I just went a little bit crazy, because I just was so very, very confused about who I was. I was like this married man, this married gay man, this married alcoholic, addict, gay man, straight man. Who am I? Like, very, very mystified, just utterly confused. And I end up on video, and I don't have the video anymore. My ex-wife may have it, I'm not sure. But on video, I smash a mirror inside of our house, and I take one of the shards, and I threaten to kill myself with it, and then I run at the camera, and I'm trying to kill her with it. So I had now gone beyond just being suicidal. I had gone beyond trying to escape myself. I had now come to this point of just like I did not recognize the person in that camera, and seeing that scared me. I legitimately was scared of who I was. That night I ended up in jail, and the next morning, because I was so scared of who I was, and she was gone, I decided to take my full bottle of pills and swallow them all at once. And I said, here it goes. I'm going to leave this planet. And I took all the pills, and, I didn't want to hurt anybody. I really didn't want to ever see that monster come back out who tried to kill this woman who I did love, who I did want to be best friends with. I didn't want to be the person who I had become. And so the only option there was to kill myself. So I ate those pills, and I started walking down the road, because I figured if I stayed in the house that I was surely just going to get found, and that one of them was going to call the cops. So I just decided to walk down the road, and eventually I would fall. Well, I woke up, and I was in the hospital, and I had my stomach pumped, and there's this woman sitting beside me, and she just says, Mark, I love you. You don't deserve to die. You are a beautiful person. And I was very sad that I had not died. And at the same time, I was very, very unworthy to be in the presence of this woman. And so the next day, I went back home, and I started planning how I would kill myself again. Because I wasn't worthy. Before it was, the fear of who I'd become, the fear of the person that I could be. But now I just wasn't worthy of having what I actually had in my life, of having the grace, the love. And so I decided how I could do it that, was that I wasn't going to fail. And so what my objective was to get really drunk and go jump off a bridge into a frozen river. And so I packed my dog up into my truck, and along with a fifth of vodka, and started driving down the road. I wake up sitting down beside the bridge as if I was too drunk to actually jump off of it. And when I wake up, I also look at my phone, and on my phone, a very similar situation happens that had happened in the hospital the night before. And I see all these text messages from people who I had hurt my whole life. My mom, my dad, my cousins, my brother, my ex-wives, my best friends who were in town, and they were all looking for me. And they were all wondering where I was. And I was like, why are these people looking for me? Why do these people really even care? But they did. And, when I woke up and I saw these messages, I decided it was finally time to not really get my shit together necessarily, but I decided it was time to stop listening to what I believed about myself, that I was unworthy, that I was not beautiful, that I was a horrible person. At this point, I wasn't even concerned about my sexuality. I was just concerned about how horrible I had been to other people and how unworthy I felt for life itself. And I decided that those thoughts were the only thoughts that I had, and they were the thoughts that were leading me into just these horrible, dark places. And I decided that moment to stop listening to my thoughts and start listening to what other people believed about me. It's kind of contrary to what a lot of you hear when you're growing up, is like, don't trust what other people say and think about you. But I got to the point in my life where that was the only safe thing to do, was to believe what the other people in my life thought about me, because what I believed about me was not true. And I think that that was my wake-up call, was when I started to believe that I'm worthy, believe that I am beautiful, believe that I can be a productive member of society. But I had no idea how to get there. I was so far gone. I had gained back all my weight. I was just really lost, and I decided to get a gym membership that day. Actually, I got a gym membership, and I went to the gym and I jumped into the pool because I was too ashamed. I was too nervous to be in a place like, the pool was always empty. It was out in Montana. Nobody swam. And actually, there were quite a bit of swimmers. They just weren't there at that time when I was there. And so I went to the pool instead of the weight room because I was too ashamed to be in the weight room. I was too self-conscious to go walk on a treadmill or go to a cycle class. I went to the pool. I jumped into the pool as quick as I could. I hid under the water and just started swimming, and I swam a couple laps, and I was freaking exhausted. I was so tired. I thought that I was going to drown while I was halfway through this pool. I was like, I am going to drown but I had no option. I had to keep swimming. And when I made it to the other side, I had this feeling inside, this overwhelming sense of feeling that I had just escaped death. I had made it, probably just 50 yards, maybe 100 yards in a swimming pool. And I got out of that swimming pool just like huffing and puffing and blue because I could barely breathe, so out of shape. And I went over to the sauna where it was dark and I could like hide and catch my breath and just be in the hot and relax. And while I'm in the sauna, this guy is sitting in there and he goes, have you ever done a triathlon? And I go, no, I haven't ever done a triathlon. Are you crazy? Like, only crazy people do triathlons. And he said, well, I did a triathlon. And he goes, you should think about doing a triathlon. And I'm like, if this guy did a triathlon, well, maybe I can too. And so I signed up that night for my first Ironman. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I started training for this triathlon. And as I was doing so, I began to encounter things about myself that otherwise I probably wouldn't have. And so one of the first things that I encountered and began to notice was that I had a very, very, very deep sense of fear about acceptance and accepting my weaknesses, accepting the areas in my life that I needed to grow, and accepting that I was not a full-blown athlete anymore. I was overweight. I could barely run. And because I pushed myself like that, I ended up pulling my Achilles tendon, and I could barely walk. And I was walking down the street one day. Some guy says, what did you do? And I said, I'm training for a triathlon and I ran too hard. And he goes, that's not supposed to happen. Do you have a coach? And I go, a coach? Why would I have a coach? You can download a plan online and you can just do it. And that's what I did, and I'm doing just fine. And he goes, it doesn't look like you're doing just fine. And I take this information, and he gives me his card. He gives me his information. I take this information back to my wife, and I'm like, you won't believe it, but this guy says that I can't train for a triathlon alone. And she goes, he might be right, Mark. You might need to consider this. And I asked him if he could help me with the triathlon. So he read out a training plan, and we had our phones connected to where he saw my workouts, and he guided me along the process. And in doing so, I began to succeed. And that success, like, it kind of filled me up with that grandiosity again. And I thought that I was the best, and it snuck back into me. And and then I got out onto my first training race, and it was a sprint triathlon. No, it was an Olympic distance triathlon. And I remember standing there before the swim, and this was in Bozeman, Montana, and it was springtime. It was like May, the snow's just melting, and it was sleeting. So there was like snow rain falling on us. It was like 42 degrees, freezing cold. I'm in a wetsuit. I'm about to jump in the water. I had never swam with other people in my life before, and I had never swam in a lake in a race. And so I didn't really know how to do it, but for some reason inside I was like, I'm the best. And I jump into the water, the gun goes off, I jump into the water, and I'm swimming, and then all of a sudden it comes to me that I'm not the best. Like, I need to be humble. I'm not the best. And then I instantly go from this like great state of grandiosity all the way down to this deepest, darkest despair, and I have a panic attack in the water, and I start flailing around, and I begin to choke on the water, and I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like my wetsuit is restricting me, and like I felt like I was almost in that movie Anaconda, and I was just being strangled by my own wetsuit, and that I was about to go underwater. And I reached my hand up trying to get one of the kayakers to come over and rescue me. And then it just kind of dawned on me, because I had been working really hard, and it just kind of dawned on me. Believe what others had told you. Believe what you have done. Believe in yourself. Believe that this coach had trained you to make it through this triathlon and to not drown in this water. And so I did, and I believed, and I just put one arm in front of the next, and I started doing what he had taught me to do. And sure enough, after some time, I got out of that water. I was like, there was 90 people there. I think I was 89th out of the water. I ended up finishing the race, took me like 6 hours, which is a lot longer than an Olympic triathlon. But I had completed it, and I realized after I completed that I had conquered one of my biggest fears, which was my fear of faith, my fear of just believing and trusting in the process, of trusting that what worked for these people who had gone before me in sobriety could also work for me. What these people who really cared about me said, and what these people were trying to help me do, it could really help me. It could really get me to where I wanted to be. And so at this point, I decide that, it's time to just go and submerge myself one day and just go hang out with a whole bunch of gay men and see if that is who I am. And I go to a big gay, it's kind of like a gay bathhouse, right? It's out in Denver, Colorado, and it's just a whole bunch of gay men hanging out naked. and probably not the best place to really go and figure out like and meet people who are going to be friends. But I go with that intention, and I just go just to like be surrounded by it. And I had never done it sober, and so I go down there and I'm hanging out, and I feel this sense of peace. It's Memorial Day, right before my race, and I feel this sense of peace, and I'm just sitting there watching people jump in the pool and hanging out, and I'm just like, wow, I wish that I could be this free. I wish that this was me. And I meet this man who he comes over and he starts talking to me, and I hear his story out. And about 5 years before meeting me, this man had a very, very, very similar story to me. He was married with kids, lost, didn't know what to do, was getting depressed, suicidal, using drugs, and he decided to come out of the closet, and he found freedom. The same thing happened when the guy in the sauna said, I did an Ironman. The same thing happened that day by that pool. I said, wow, if he did it, maybe I can too. Maybe I'm not alone anymore. Other people have been through what I've been through. And so I asked that man if he would help me to finally come out and to finally start accepting myself. And I said, that's my goal. And it took a couple of months. I had the Ironman to cross, and I had some more, things that I needed to accept and some more fears that I had to overcome. And after a couple of months, there was the very last thing that I had to do before my race was to completely embody the triathlete, was to shave my legs. And I was so horrified of doing that because shaving my legs it emasculated me, right? It took away my masculine identity. But I was at this point where I was like not going to not do it, right? I was not going to let things hold me back because of what other people believed or what other people thought. And the very first time in my life, I was like, I'm going to do it regardless of how I think other people are going to portray it. And so that night before the Ironman, I shaved my legs, and when I did, I just I really liked it. I laid in the bed, and I felt like all the fibers of the cloth. I got up the next morning, felt the air conditioning blowing on my legs. They're all sensitive, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be so much fun to run and swim in these shaved legs. And so I'm all excited. I'm more excited about the shaved legs, honestly, than I am about the race. But at the same time, I know for a fact, because my wife had been saying it for months. She's like, if you shave your legs, I'm not even gonna touch you until it grows back. And I was just like, that gave me like a sense of accomplishment, because it was the very first time really that I had said, I'm going to do something for me, despite the fact that I may lose the esteem or the acceptance of a woman, this woman who's helping me feel more like a man. And I did it anyway. And then I remember when she saw that my legs were shaved, just like a ghost kind of fell over her face. And she said, I don't even recognize you. You've become someone different over the past couple of years. She was like, I know that you're healthy. This is all wonderful, but I don't know if I love the man who you've become. But here was the thing, is when she said that, I wasn't hurt, because for the first time in my life, I loved the man who I had become, because I had accepted who I was. I had allowed other people into my life. I wasn't alone anymore. And I trusted that as long as I was true to myself and true to other people and true to the process, that good things would happen and good things could continue to happen. So I crossed that finish line, and the song that kept raining in my head was "We Are the Champions" by Queen. And that's the way I felt. I felt like I was finally a champion, that I had finally crossed this finish line that was my statement to life. The first breath of life that I had really had was this year. Was that year that I crossed that finish line. And that is the person that we all have inside of us. We all have our unique gifts. We all have our unique strengths. We can all give something back to this earth. And the biggest thing is, we're not alone. None of us are alone. There's a huge community out there saying, I did it, you can do it too. All it takes is a little bit of seeking to tap into those. All it takes maybe is just to go sit in the sauna and hear somebody say something and go, if he did it, I can do it too. If he made it this day, maybe I can do it too. If they stop cutting themselves, maybe I can do it too. If this person stopped drinking, if this person got up off the street somehow, maybe I can do it too. Not alone. I know I'm not alone. And that's how I've learned to thrive. That's how I began to survive. And that's how I crossed the line of my suicide race.